Alright. Let's settle down. It's just crypto. I am Just, but my mama call me Justin. Welcome to another DeFi Kingdoms video. This is going to be the first part in a series where I do kind of a quick and dirty overview of each of the 5 classes we have available now. It is April 22nd, aka 5 days after the release of the Seer, so I'm going to be starting with that one. But if you're viewing this in the future and you're new to the game, I don't necessarily recommend you start with this one. Seer is the most complicated class we have so far by a lot. It uses some of the most complicated mechanics we have. And if it had just not released 5 days ago and there's kind of a lack of information out there, I would probably start with Knight, Archer, Priest, Warrior, and then Seer in that order. But here we are. Everything I'm going to be talking about in these videos is in relation to void hunts. It's entirely possible, pretty probable, that PvP rankings will be a lot different, but I'm not confident that I can really make any predictions on that front. You know, with these classes, especially like the wonky classes like a Seer, I think it's going to be very contextual based on what else we have available in terms of other classes, and just like some really small combos that aren't apparent right now might become apparent and might become extremely important. But we don't really need to worry about that if we're talking about void hunts. So that's the lens I'm going to be looking at the Seer today in terms of what problems it solves, what problems it causes. And yeah, the role I have identified as both range DPS and support, that is kind of the most interesting part to me, because I do think it is the most versatile class we have so far. Maybe with the exception of the level 15 priest who can do multiple range DPS spells. But this is pretty cool. I don't think there's one definitive way to build your Seer. It kind of depends on the spectrum of range DPS and support based on what you need on the void hunt you're doing. The boar and the birds play out differently, as we probably know. So like if you're fighting the boars and you have a warrior and an archer, you might lean more towards the support role because you just don't need that much range DPS with this. Whereas if you have a knight and kind of a differently built warrior or something like that, you might opt to load some more range DPS type of skills. But I do think it is basically split down the middle between these two, which is kind of interesting. In terms of stats, I've done a little bit of dark summoning for Seers, not too much. Haven't spent a whole lot of crystal on it, don't really do that for PvE heroes. But I made one uncommon that I really like. It has like a lesser vigor stone to give it a chance at that good baseline HP, which does matter, especially in the boar fight. And then I leveled up like this: wisdom as my main, intelligence, agility as my two secondaries. Maybe if I had to do it all over again, I would probably split points between agility, intelligence, and dexterity evenly, because it really sucks to miss, especially if you've put a lot of resources or time into a certain skill. So unfortunately, even with our casters, I think with, wizards and scholars as well, dexterity is going to matter in this game, even for classes that do not have a high growth rate. Okay, in terms of skills, tier 3 is where I've kind of found most of the power in the Seer. It kind of picking between Sanctuary and Time Sync. It kind of dictates how I want to build my Seers in terms of range DPS or support. They're both very powerful skills. I think these are their best 2 skills, all things considered, but they're in the same tier. And I'll wait until the end for rating. It's not like a tier system. I just want to rate these, since I'm doing all 5 classes, like in terms of 1 through 5. But anyways, let's look at some actual Seers. This one on the left is the level 15 plus that I've been using. This was actually one of my elite gardeners back when that was a thing. So it actually put a ton of points into vitality, which I would not do over again. I would want these points split between dexterity, agility, and intelligence, but it is what it is. He's still fine. He's got a ton of hit points kind of randomly, and also because of that vitality. Let's go ahead and talk about tier 1. The skills that I choose between, whether I need offense or defense, are either Warstone or Future Sight. Neither of these are very good. It is super awkward to have to wait 10 ticks for your heal when you really need a heal. It is also super awkward to have to channel and spend 1.8 turns, if you're lucky, to do a pretty medium damage spell. So I think all 3 of these tier 1 skills are quite poor for the Seer, unfortunately, and they cost quite a bit of mana. But that's what we got. I did already load this out for the skills that I use against the Rockbach. It's good at the end to kill the chick as it comes out of the egg, and you can find spots to kind of just slip it in, whether you're against Rockbachs or boars. It doesn't really do anything else except for just medium damage, and it's actually quite poor damage when you factor in the extra time taken. Moving on to tier 2, I already tipped my hand on Artificer. I think this one is very good, but I also like Astrologer quite a lot. Again, we have a delineation in this tier between damage. In this instance, it's indirect damage with this 5% haste for everybody, and support, which is just passive, more HP for your entire party. This is excellent. You don't have to spend a skill to do it. It's almost on par with a skill, and you'll usually get it twice per game, and you just don't have to spend a turn or any mana. It's great. But you see already, since I chose damage in tier 1, I'm choosing support in tier 2. Moving on to tier 3, we have the choice again between Sanctuary, which is awesome support, very powerful, or damage, plus a very nice debuff in time sync. Like I said before, I think these are the two most powerful skills for the Seer. Sanctuary is probably the most powerful skill in a vacuum. You don't have to channel for it. It costs a lot of mana, but it gives you a big effect. Think of it as kind of a combination of the two priest skills that also cost a ton of mana. The numbers aren't as big on either way, but getting them both at the same time for just one action. But I usually do pick Time Sync instead, just out of necessity. Again, you don't need to channel for this, so I almost always open up with Time Sync if I have that, to either target the front boar or the, front in either way, or Mama Bach. But slow is an excellent debuff, and the damage is okay. Waiting 30 ticks for the damage is super awkward, but this is what we got. If one of my guys is blind or confused for 3 rounds or stunned or whatever, I can't just wait 800 initiative to purify him. I need to purify right now with freedom for the priest, or I just need to get over it. And that's what I do by picking one of the other two instead. Waiting on the purify effect is not good. Tier 4, significantly weaker than tier 3, but decent. Rejuvenation Stone is a quite powerful effect. I'm a big fan of Holy Beacon for the priest. That's the obvious comp. This does more overall healing, but it costs you, again, 1.8 turns. If I'm going to spend 1.8 turns instead of 1 turn to do something, I would like for the numbers to be 180%. Of the Holy Beacon numbers, they're not. And also, they might not even show up because I can get interrupted in either of these fights, which makes it quite poor. But with this particular load up, I do want to have the option for 1 heal. So this is what we got. In the next build I'll show you, I'm going to use Chrono Purge instead. This is actually deceptively pretty good. It's got a lot of text on it. Most of that text doesn't matter. So don't get confused about it. What really matters is there at the bottom where it says deal 1.5 spell times 2.0 intelligence. But it's not that much. It's actually the same as the tier 1 skill, except a little bit more weighted towards intelligence. You just get it immediately with 1 turn instead of 1.8. So it is your highest DPS skill. So usually if I'm loading Chrono Purge, I will just cast it on turn 1, and that's usually it. Although there can definitely be times towards the end where I'll cast it again. Like I said, tier 4, just not very good. And also there's another just skill to ignore here, Osmotic Ward. It only really protects you if you get to the end and have to fight a Void Chicken. So since the other two are pretty poor, I could see loading this on the Burb fight just as an in case of emergency, break glass, whatever type of thing. Because the Seer is pretty poor in the Mother Clucker fight, so you do tend to fight more Void Chickens. It's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, I guess. You bring a relatively poor hero, you end up fighting more chickens than you would want to, so this ends up having text. On to tier 5, I'm not 100% sure on this one. But I do think Barrier Stone is just the best in terms of raw power. The other two are super cute, but I don't think they're actually that good. Mostly because they just cost too much mana. They have Amnesia 4, so you can't really rely on them. And they're just incremental advantage, whereas Barrier Stone can really, really help you. But honestly, all 3 of them I don't think are that groundbreaking. It's not like the Priest or the Archer that gets a significant upgrade. At level 15, I think it's kind of more like the Knight. You just get a small bonus. But I will definitely consider the possibility I'm very wrong about Clairvoyance and or Divination. I don't think the mana reduction matters that much, hardly ever. And I think these effects are just too small. Physical accuracy on your Knight, sure, that's excellent. But it only lasts 2 turns, and I don't know, you don't really need the mana reduction on your Knight. You need the mana reduction on either your Archer or your Warrior, and those guys have already better physical accuracy than your Knight. So I don't know that this makes too much sense. This one is just more raw damage. I don't think the cost reduction matters that much again. Like I said, I think both of these are just too cute, and Barrier Stone is just better. Let's look at a slightly different Seer now. I leveled up, I think, to Dark Summon for Intelligence and Foraging, so it ended up with a lot of Dexterity and Intelligence, and relatively small Wisdom with pretty good Agility. So I think this one's actually kind of interesting. I've been playing it, I like it, but I don't think that's like any sort of secret tech. I don't really think you should be doing Intelligence or Agility over Wisdom ever. Wisdom just helps you on everything, and I don't think a better Chrono Purge really matters enough to pump your Intelligence, but it's a thing you can do. So this is the build that I use more for the boars, where the first one I used more for the birds. In tier 1, I am choosing to heal with Future Sight instead of doing damage with Warstone, because against the boars you don't really need this burst damage here at the end with Warstone. You have 2 other heroes that if you can just get them to the finish line with Future Sight and Sanctuary and then contribute contribute a little bit of damage with your other tiers. I think that's what you want to do against the boars. That being said, I don't think you would make a mistake by using Artificer instead of Astrologer. I'm just kind of trying them out. Then in tier 3, we've talked about Sanctuary already. I think this is even more powerful against Wild Charge, but since I'm sacrificing my time sink, I do load Chrono Purge to go along with it. It's not very good. Turn 1, I'm always going to start with Chrono Purge, basically on the front boar. Later in the game, I'll probably cast it on Mama Boar. You know, like I said, it's just our highest damage spell, and I think it would be overkill to load Rejuvenation Stone in front of it. I don't know that we need this much healing. If we're going to do that much healing, we could go ahead and do the Oracle, which I haven't talked about too much, kind of on purpose. I'm going to talk about it a little bit here at the end. Also on this Intelligence Artificer, I'm still going to do Barrier Stone. I think when this guy hits level 15, although you could certainly opt for Clairvoyance instead, maybe since you're leveraging your intelligence even more, this is even more damage that it does. So I think either one of these is fine. I'll certainly try out Clairvoyance. This guy just isn't level 15 yet, so I haven't seen how much damage they do under the effects of an intelligence-based Seer's Clairvoyance. It's pretty underwhelming with the level 16 that I have cast it with, though. So something tells me I just want to do Barrier Stone into Sanctuary, and Nane Boo Boo, you can't hit me, waste a little bit of time, but get the easy dub against the boars. Then like I said, I have spent a little bit of time trying to do the Oracle build, mostly just as a meme. I really don't recommend this against the Rockbox. You could do it with like a super jacked archer using a swift potion, just like carrying your party super hard, but why? I would much rather pair that super jacked archer with this guy and just give him a little bit of support to keep him alive and contribute something to the fight instead of just derping around. But speaking of derping around, that is my impression of Time Swell. It costs too much mana. It doesn't do very much. Any amount of damage that you can kind of contribute as an Oracle, I think matters. So I would pick Time Swell. I just don't think it's good enough. However, Sanctuary is very good. You get a reduction and can basically spam Sanctuary every turn if you want to. If you were going to bring the Oracle against Bad Mother Clucker, I guess that would be a good time to do Osmotic Ward because you're almost certainly going to get a Void Chicken because you brought an Oracle. But against the boars, obviously I would just bring Rejuvenation Stone instead. Again, you do no damage, so the best part of Chrono Purge is off the table. I still think it's Barrier Stone. Adding some amount of damage with your Oracle is kind of the same logic with Clairvoyance as Time Swell, but I don't know. I think I don't want to pass on the Barrier Stone value too much if I'm making it to 15. Maybe I'll change my mind on this, but for now my impression on both Clairvoyance and Divination is they both cost too much mana and they don't last long enough. They're not impactful enough. The cost reduction doesn't really matter because the heroes that I'm actually using for hunts have enough mana to do what they need to do. So like this is just solving a problem that doesn't exist. And unfortunately, that is kind of a common theme to the Seer above all else. It solves problems that don't really exist in terms of the hunts, which is why I've ranked it 5th out of the 5 classes. And while I am using them now because they're a lot of fun, I really enjoyed learning their techniques. I think that after the novelty wears off here in a couple weeks, I will probably just switch them out of the rotation, except maybe pick my favorite one, which is the same thing I did with the Priest. Hey, somebody's got to be 5th. It's fine. It asks a little bit too much of you for what it does, so it becomes kind of a risk-reward equation that is not in your favor. Like, if I need ranged DPS, you know, the Archer exists with no qualifiers, no hoops to jump through. If I need a healer, you know, Priest exists. So why would I choose to jump through those hoops when there's not a very big payoff in terms of better DPS or healing for the Seer? Here are the 3 builds I went through once again. So much as you give your offensive Seers some amount of defensive capabilities and your defensive Seers some amount of offensive capabilities, I think you'll be fine. But yeah, that was the Seer. Exciting stuff. Really enjoyed learning this class. Really enjoyed playing this class still. I just posted a pretty hilarious ending to a fight of, I can barely even describe it. Look on my Twitter, I guess, for the 22nd. Like, just crazy shit happens in these fights when you bring a Seer. That's a good reason to bring a Seer. They can, of course, adjust these things, and I think they probably should. Not that anybody asked me. Like I said, I think just the risk-reward equation is a little bit off. You know, from a game design perspective, when a skill is really asking a lot of the player in terms of setup, that's when you can really push the power level, and I don't really think they did that. I don't think they pushed it that hard. But hey, that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think. If you found something super busted that I've missed, let me know. But most of all, play whatever you think is fun and stack up that loot. PvP is coming, and then this all goes out the window and we start all over in our evaluation. Don't know when I'll trace back for the other classes, but probably pretty soon. Peace till then.